Hello, this is Earl Purdy, and I'm here to do Lesson 4 from A Course in Miracles, which is These thoughts do not mean anything. They are like the things I see in this room, on this street, from this window, in this place. These thoughts do not mean anything. Unlike the preceding lessons, these exercises do not begin with the idea for the day. In these practice periods, begin with noting the thoughts that are crossing your mind. Notice the thoughts that are crossing your mind for about a minute. Notice the thoughts that are crossing your mind for about a minute. Then apply the idea to the thoughts that are crossing your mind. If you are already aware of unhappy thoughts, use your unhappy thoughts as subjects for the idea. These thoughts do not mean anything. Do not, however, select only the thoughts you think are bad. You will find, if you train yourself to look at your thoughts, that your thoughts represent such a mixture. In a sense, none of your thoughts can be called good or bad. That is why none of your thoughts really mean anything. In selecting the subjects for the application of today's idea, these thoughts do not mean anything, the usual specificity is required. That means don't be afraid to use your so-called good thoughts as well as your so-called bad thoughts. None of your thoughts represents your real thoughts. Your real thoughts are covered up by your so-called bad and good thoughts. The good thoughts are but shadows of what lies beyond, and shadows make sight difficult. The so-called bad thoughts are blocks to sight. The so-called bad thoughts make seeing impossible. You don't want either your so-called good thoughts or your so-called bad thoughts. This is a major exercise. This exercise will be repeated from time to time in somewhat different form. The aim here is to train you in the first steps toward the goal of separating the meaningless from the meaningful. This exercise is a first attempt in the long-range purpose of learning to see the meaningless as outside you and the meaningful as within you. It is also the beginning of training your mind to recognize what is the same and what is different. In using your thoughts for application of the idea for today, identify each thought by the central figure or event each thought contains. For example, this thought about whatever or whoever does not mean anything. This thought is like the things I see in this room, on this street, and so on. This thought I'm having about whatever doesn't mean anything. This thought that I'm having about whoever doesn't mean anything. This thought that I'm having right now doesn't mean anything. You can also use the idea for a particular thought that you recognize as harmful. You can use the idea, these thoughts do not mean anything. This practice is useful, but is not a substitute for the more random procedures to be followed for the exercises. Do not, however, examine your mind for more than a minute or so. Don't examine your mind. You are too experienced. You are too inexperienced. You are too inexperienced as yet to avoid a tendency to become pointlessly preoccupied. Further, since these exercises are the first of their kind, you may find the suspension of judgment in connection with these thoughts particularly difficult. Do not repeat these exercises more than 3 or 4 times during the day. We will return to them later. So let's take a minute to share the idea, which is these thoughts do not mean anything. These thoughts do not mean anything. These thoughts do not mean anything. This thought about whatever, whoever, doesn't mean anything. These thoughts do not 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 mean anything. This thought about my boss doesn't mean anything. This thought about my child doesn't mean anything. This thought of upset doesn't mean anything. Even this happy thought doesn't mean anything. These thoughts do not 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 mean anything. So listen to this and pass these videos on to people that you feel might benefit from these videos. And check out my classes at www.earlpurdy.com. Let peace extend from my mind to yours.